class. Welcome to Abroad Sex Education, where we discuss everything you wish you learned in school. I'm your host and mentor on the myths of masculinity, Sin. And today, my co-host is the best example I know of non-toxic sex.
Hey, embrace that femininity.
This podcast is a sex education resource intended for an adult audience. We'll be having real, inclusive conversations about sexuality, pleasure, relationships, gender, identity, and more. Some topics may be considered explicit or sensitive, especially in today's lesson where we'll discuss masculinity, loneliness, online radicalization of men, suicide, and violence against women. Please take care while listening. Our goal is to break the stigma and provide the kind of sex education many of us never got. We're learning too, and we're bringing what we learned straight to the classroom so we can all grow together. You deserve to know what this is about so you can make an informed choice to listen. Or not. That's what consent looks like, even here. Today's lesson is how to be a man, where we're going to talk about masculinity and the manosphere. Any initial thoughts just from the title alone?
Well, you need to be swift as a coursing river and with all the strength of a great typhoon, mysterious as the dark side of the moon.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot.
A lot of requirements there.
Yeah.
I think that in the podcast, I talk about how societal structures or society has been set up against women. I talk about it a lot. I don't necessarily talk about the other perspective. And while I do think that women historically have had a tougher time than men, I do see how men get indoctrinated in this social world of how to be a certain way, and I see how it affects them and how it could even lead them to the manosphere. And so I felt like this was actually a really good topic to bring up now, because some of the podcast episodes, me and Brooklyn make fun of like the male loneliness epidemic, or we just talk about problems that men create on their own. While I do take that viewpoint, I still can look at the other perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about there for sure.
What do you think it means to be a man?
It's complicated, right? I think that there's a lot of social definitions that come into play there, and a lot of it comes from external factors of people telling you a certain type of way, either in media or family dynamics or, the cesspool of modern growth, which is puberty and middle school times, all define like what pressures are given to you and how a man should act versus a woman should act.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a tricky layering for sure.
Well, in today's subjects, we're going to talk about those. So the first one we're going to go into is sociology. We're going to dive into the social scripts that men are taught at a young age and how they're reinforced when you're older. Then we're going to go into psychology, where we go down the rabbit hole of the red pill. So it's going to be how they get there, who's susceptible, and how they stay stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, we're going to go into communications, where we're just going to talk about your experience with toxic masculinity and how men can break that cycle.
That sounds fun. For the longest time, I genuinely only knew red pill as in the Matrix reference.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea that it had any kind of connotation with any kind of like group or online communities or mentality or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I think the first time that somebody mentioned it to me, I was like, I don't understand, because my only context was the Matrix, which doesn't really come up in conversation very often. So
yeah, it's from the term red pill is actually, it's from the Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
Like they took it from the Matrix. There's the initial slide for the psychology section is going to go in more detail about it.
Right.
But yeah. All right. So what does it mean to be a man in society? So socially, masculinity is equated to strength. Like you have to be strong. And it's usually not like mental strength. It's physical strength. I think when men think of being strong mentally, they're just thinking about being disciplined, which is completely different. But masculinity tends to be focused on like physical strength and discipline. And I see that a lot when it comes to like gym bros. It's like, And anything that's aligned to femininity is equated to weakness. It's a very socially black and white definition of like, well, if masculinity is strength, then femininity has to be weakness. So anything women do is equated to weakness.
Like masculinity is only ever attributed as a positive trait to men, right? And femininity is only attributed as a positive trait to women, which there's loads of layers of grays in there in between.
Other things that are taught are like men aren't allowed to cry. Men don't cry. I remember my cousin when we were little, she was like super into like Star Wars. And the way that my cousin would try to get her to not like cry when she would be upset, she'd be like, Jedis don't cry. Which most of the Jedis in Star Wars were men, because this was like the first like series. I think it's a hard thing to tell children too, because it's like babies cry, children cry.
Yeah.
And so then to like tell them like you can't do this because
Internalize. Yeah.
it just is not what you do because of the genitalia that you have, you know.
Yeah.
It's just sad.
This is a very fascinating one. This one's always been kind of funny to me because like everybody feels sadness. Well, not everybody. I'm sure there are some people who don't, but generally most people don't have the capacity to not cry, right? And so I think that it is really bizarre to be like, oh, well, if you're expressing that emotion outwardly, it's a flaw if you're a man. If you're masculine and you're crying, it's a sign of weakness because you can't be, reserved and dedicated and driven to like do whatever you think and push through, It's an interesting one. There's really I can't really see in modern days any reason why that should be true, right? Like, I think what tends to be my experience with people is like, if it's somebody who has this kind of mentality about like, oh, well, I can't express my external emotion. When it does, it's freaking bad. Like, because they've been boiling it up inside and it comes out in these like outbursts or uncontrolled reactions, right? Because it's hard to internalize that kind of emotion. Like, the sooner you can externalize it, the sooner you can process it. So if you're not externalizing it, you're not processing that trauma, whatever the reason is that's causing you that you might want to be crying.
Yeah. I think it's because like, oh, women are emotional and like you can't be like a woman. You can't be emotional.
Right. Yeah.
It's still tied back to the like anything that a woman does is considered lesser.
Yeah. That one's interesting too, because like I think that there tends to be like, obviously like men's hormones aren't nearly as volatile as women's, right? Like you don't have a cycle that every single month your entire brain chemistry is being completely flipped on its head, right? And so I think that it's very easy for a man who's not taking into the perspective of like, oh, well, this woman that I'm talking to is experiencing, hormonal differences every 2 weeks, right? Like I think it's very easy for someone who's in that situation and they're not thinking about being empathetic, just being like, well, look at this person, like, and the way they're acting. They're just like, so they're so emotional, right? It's all over the place, right? Whereas I'm always constant, so.
They find it easier to blame the person rather than consider the external factors of why they could be acting
absolutely.
Like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing that's taught is that, this was something that I saw in an interview. I don't remember. I think it was a poet. And I remember it was like a Daily Show interview, but it's like they mentioned like, do you notice like a lot of the words that men use to describe accomplishments always have like a destructive connotation? Like you killed it. Yeah, you crushed it. Yeah. It's always a really like hurtful and it teaches men to navigate the world in like a destructive nature.
That's super interesting. I've actually never thought about that. But there are a lot of like really strong sort of
smashed it.
Yeah, yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, language there is really interesting.
And it's socially acceptable within that space. You even said you didn't even think of it in that perspective. And even when that poem said it, I was like, oh, like that is true. It got so coded into our language.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. I'm immediately thinking like, oh, like I think the next time that I have a tendency to like respond to things as like very like, yeah, like we did it, right? Like you're on fire or whatever. Like I do that stuff all the time. And I'm curious if the next time that I like immediately reach for that kind of a response, if I'll put in a word that's very destructive, right? I'm curious to see how my own actions will be. I don't know if this is the case because I'm sure whichever poet made this statement is probably more informed than I am. But I also think like just the physical gesturing, right? Like when you said, oh, phrases that men use have a structure. I did like a, yeah, I punched the air, right? And like, that was just sort of like an excitement thing. But I don't see that many like women doing like, like very physical gestures in terms of excitement, right? So I wonder if that's also the case for men.
Oh, that's a good point. Men are expected to be providers and protectors. This is honestly probably one of the bigger reasons why there's this quote, male loneliness epidemic, is because this is the expectation that at a young age, men are taught like you have to learn how to provide, or you have to provide for your family, or you have to like protect your family because that's what you do as a man. Information is getting spread with the internet, and women have more access to education. They have the ability to now be their own providers. It's the whole thing of like, you told me if I worked hard and I got an education and go to college, then I would have a job after college.
Yeah, it's the social disillusionment.
Yeah. And then now to be like, you told me that if I just worked really hard and then provided, then I can find a woman or to be with who I can provide and protect for. But now women are like, I don't want you to provide or protect me.
Right. I think the thing there too is like, I mean, women nowadays are more likely to get higher education. They're more likely to stay in school. They're more likely to like build themselves in a big way, at least based on my very rough understanding of like statistics of college admissions and things like that, which may not be the best metric of that, but who knows. And I think that like that kind of runs counter to what a lot of men traditionally may have thought, like our parents' generation, right? Like there just weren't that as many women in higher education because a lot of them would stay home or whatever else, right? Like whatever social structures determined that. Like, and I think that when you get into the workspace, there's still that friction too of like, oh, you have like higher paying positions, the glass ceiling, like all this stuff is kind of like reinforcing this sort of friction again between women who are capable of achieving more and pushing boundaries, right? But then having this like old guard of men who are out there in the world, right? Who didn't grow up in that space, you know, and didn't experience a place where, you know, women could be as successful as they are, right? And so there's this sort of mentality about like, oh, you're a man, you have to be the breadwinner, right? You have to go and work hard and, you know, be out there for 12 hours a day doing whatever it is so that you can come home and provide for your family, right? And that's kind of a hard thing to unwrite, I would say, for men who aren't maybe familiar with that, have lived that, maybe not our generation, but like our parents' generation who've lived that for like 20, 30 years, you know?
Yeah.
Pretty hard to change that, I would say.
And that's why like feminism is the problem to people who are in the incel community. Because now women have rights, they have the ability to provide, they've completely taken away a man's role, quote unquote, in society. I think it's a fear of, well, now what do I do? What do I do now? They just took away the one thing I knew how to do. And it's like, this is the only thing they've known. Sometimes people lack the skills to consider alternate paths.
Right. Yeah, definitely a tricky one for sure.
Asking for help being a sign of weakness.
I don't know about that one specifically. I think that's more of like a personality base, I guess, because when I think about like some people are very extroverted and externally expressing and like very quick to communicate, right? And if you're quick to communicate, you may be quick to ask for help if you are stuck, right? And I don't necessarily think that might be the same with men. However, what you said earlier, right? Like if men are conditioned and trained to be reserved and quiet and, you know, keep everything inside, then maybe that does go hand in hand. Like oh, well, I don't need to ask for help because I can solve the problem myself, right?
Yeah.
I can have the stubbornness to get through the problem without asking for assistance.
I think part of that is valuing independence in a
Mm-hmm.
way, because it's like, oh, he's a self-made man, or he did it all. It's
Mm-hmm.
like this. It's this sense of pride in being able to convince people that you did it by yourself. You didn't need anyone's help. When realistically, in situations like that, especially like in business, when someone is like self-made, it's like, no, there was other people that helped them get through this
Yeah,
journey.
self-made is a delusion. Like,
Yeah.
it's completely impossible, right? Like, there's no way. I was talking with a friend about this just recently. Like, there's literally every external thing that you experience in your life in some way is shaping you. And so even if you are like, I didn't go to college, like I like taught myself. Well, no, you didn't. You looked at YouTube and someone else taught you. Like, you didn't just learn everything all of a sudden. You may not call that asking for help, but you're using other resources that somebody else provided. That is help. Like, just because somebody else wasn't there in the room with you to like give it to you doesn't mean you didn't gain something from someone else's efforts, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're right. Like, I think that like being, some people are not very conditioned to vocalize and say like, I'm stuck with this, or like in school, or like I had a big problem with that when I was a kid. Like, and even like when I first joined the workforce, like had to like intentionally train myself. Like, I literally set like a 20-minute timer. This is a big thing, like programming is like, you set yourself a 20-minute timer, and if you still can't solve the problem in 20 minutes, stop what you're doing and like either ask Google, or like find some other way to like stop proceeding on your own, because you're not going to complete it, you're not going to finish, right? Because I think men tend to be stubborn as a whole, right? And so there's sort of that like inherent, well, if I just stick with this a little bit longer, I'm going to figure it out by myself, right?
Yeah.
Rather than like feeling comfortable with the idea of like, well, maybe I'll just like, I don't know, ask my coworker, or like ask my other students or whatever if I'm stuck, you know?
I think a great example of this too is the fact that like some men don't like to ask for directions, and then some men also don't like to read the directions when you
I'm
are
guilty of that. Yeah.
exactly.
Use your manual, pff, trash. Like,
Right.
I can figure this out.
It's like there's a literal guide on how to do it. That's what I always say. If you don't know how to cook, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Recipes are directions, and if you
Right.
can't follow directions, that's a red flag.
Yeah. 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 I think I would use the term cooking very loosely in my capacities.
You made me paella.
Yes, but I would say,
You did your best.
yeah, I thought it turned out. I thought it was really good,
I,
actually.
I
But
did like it.
yeah, yeah, reading directions, and like one of my, I would say, biggest flaws in that is like I have a tendency to get in the car and start driving, and I will refuse. Like, I won't even think that it's necessary to like type in the directions of where I'm gonna go, because like I know the like street that I'm on, and I know exactly which direction I'm gonna go, even if I may be completely wrong once I do get in the car and turn on that, which I shouldn't do, right? You shouldn't be
I
texting
get
while
s-
driving or whatever else, right?
I
But
get so mad at you. I'm like, why are you backing up? We don't even know where we're
yeah,
going. Like,
yeah, yeah,
and the problem is because we're driving around the area I grew up. Like, I know this whole city better than you.
yeah,
So I could tell you every which way of which direction to take for most of the cities around here. But I'm trying to get better at like typing it in before we even get in the car so that I
right,
can just plug my phone in and that that you just drive the wrong direction or
yeah,
back out the wrong way
right.
to go like to different spots. It was like we need to go. You do that too sometimes when I'm like, oh, I told you something, and you're like, no.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think that's an inherent stubbornness. I got that from my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's interesting though, right? Like, I think there is sort of like an inherent, like, I just said I got that from my dad, right? And I think it comes from what social relationships you have as a kid. Like, a lot of these things, right? Like, men don't cry. Like, who's telling you that? Well, parents, adults, right? Like, expectation to be a provider and a protector, right? Like, that's the same idea as like the breadwinner concept of like, you got to go out and like get a bunch of like, you got to work hard and bring money back. And so it's those figures of authority, those adults that are your family or, parents or whatever, that are kind of teaching you those, principles as a kid.
Yeah. Parents teach us the scripts and then
Hmm.
society enforces it. So just based on these, how do you think this harms men?
How does it harm men? If you are someone who's been on the receiving end of a lot of this, let's call it advice, right? As a kid, conditioning you to think of the world a certain way. And then you experience the world and you follow the rules, you follow the people that you trust as a kid, which is the adults and the teachers and the parents of your life. And you grow up and some of the stuff doesn't really seem to hit home, right? Like you don't cry and you inter that, and you, as a kid, you're like, okay, like I'm a man, I'm not going to express my emotions. And then you build up trauma after years and years, and you have some kind of anxiety or whatever else that hits you, because that's a very natural thing to happen if you're internalizing all of this without ever talking to anybody or showing your emotions. Like there's so many things that are unspoken in a lot of these points that can come back to bite you.
That's probably one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this too, is just I can't imagine how exhausting it is to internalize like all of this. Like to me, that's like this is why men are angry all the time. The one emotion they're generally allowed to express is anger. And so even if they're sad, it turns into anger. Even if they're heartbroken, it turns into anger. Like anger is usually the only outlet that is socially acceptable for men to convey publicly. And that's so sad. Like it's so sad. Like it's so draining. It's so much more wasted energy to continue to be mad because it's just gonna eat away at you.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's that thing where it's like holding a grudge is like drinking your own poison or something? There's like some quote that's like,
yeah, I don't know the quote, but I've heard that, yeah, for sure.
and I feel like that's kind of like what it is to feel that sense of negativity. And unfortunately, that's the reason men get compelled into that manosphere. It's because they find this outlet of someone who is listening to them. They're finding that community, but then it's just a feedback loop of the like negativity they're already feeling.
Mm-hmm.
As much as what the incels community stands for upsets me, I genuinely feel so sad for all the men who've like gotten to that point.
It's no one's fault what external circumstances happen to them, right? Like just there's the same way that if you're born into a bad family or a traumatic living situation or a country with poor standards of living or government support or anything like that, like you didn't choose any of that, and you didn't choose to be taught a lot of these concepts as a kid. If other people were the ones who you were looking for advice, like you have no control over that. And as a kid, like you're just kind of thrust into a situation with no ability to navigate that except for trusting the people that tell you how to live, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you do that and you follow the rules, which have been taught to you by other people, right? And those rules don't set you up for success, well, of course you're going to be frustrated. And of course you're going to be disappointed. And of course you're going to internalize, just like what they tell you to do, to not express that anger or frustration until it snaps. And you're like, oh man, I'm pissed, I'm angry, right? Like it's just I can see the natural progression really easily of how that can kind of spiral into something really negative.
Yeah. All right. We're going to go into psychology now. We're going to go on a rabbit hole down the radical red pill. So let's learn more. Also, I would like to preface, if you are listening, great. If you are...
Well, they're obviously listening. Like,
well, I know. But if you're listening to this without the visual medium, YouTube, obviously, we're on YouTube.
And what's the name of that channel again? Just in case I'm completely living under a rock.
It's A Rad Sex Education.
Wow, it's so creative. I would never have guessed that based on the title of this podcast.
There are slides I'm going to be showing, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. There is going to be just some really graphic verbiage. And so this is probably where the main part of the consent notice is coming in. Yeah. So just a heads up there. Okay. So where did the word incel come from? So it originally started by a Canadian woman. Her name is Alana. And she started a mailing list and a website where she posted articles about struggling to find love. And so she created the website. It was called Alana's Involuntary Celibacy Project, as an online community space where people could share their fears and frustrations about the dating world. She was in her mid-20s when she created it. As she got older, she ended up like getting into a relationship and just didn't need that community anymore. So she eventually distanced herself from it. And then it transitioned into a community space for men who hate women, also known as incels. Alana later on told The Guardian in an article that it feels like being the scientist who figured out nuclear fission and then discovers it's being used as a weapon of war.
Mm.
And so the term being red-pilled is the moment that a man realizes that male privilege is a myth and that society has been set up to promote women and push men to only be subordinate. So it's just like this, I guess, aha moment for them.
All right, I have a couple thoughts here. Okay.
Yes.
So first off, I thought you may have. Are you going to talk about the manosphere after this at all, or no?
So the manosphere is like a general blanket term for men who hate women, but there's a lot of different types of men in the manosphere. So there's like men's rights activists, there's pickup artists. It's a more broader term.
So I have a few, I don't know, begrudging statements on some of the terminology on this slide. Okay, so this is my like feistiness gonna come out here a little bit, right? So I don't really think that the manosphere or incels or red pill always have a connotation of negativity. They do have it, but it's not all the time, because the manosphere, in my personal understanding of the word, a lot of the people join into a community of people who like exercising or people who, want to be physical or whatever, right? And like that on its own isn't necessarily men who hate women, right? And like I can totally see how someone who goes to the gym because they want to be physically fit, right? For no other reason other than like physical health or whatever, then gets exposure to people who like want to do things together, men who want to do things together, and that might be focused on like physical activities or whatever. Again, there's nothing in there is really geared around like, oh, like let's stick it to the women, right? Like that's not really my understanding, at least, is that not all men who are in the manosphere are inherently negative or bad, but there are enough bad apples in the batch, and they're really bad, that like it encourages that kind of space.
I think you're considering like manosphere as like any space where men exist together, which
I believe that is the actual term, though. Like, I think it is just communities where men spend time together.
the Manosphere is a varied collection of websites, blogs, and online forums promoting masculinity, misogyny, and opposition to feminism. There's differences like going to the gym and hanging out with a bunch of guys is not, I wouldn't consider that a manosphere at all. There's just guys who gym together, but like a manosphere, the sociological definition is that link to it being an online space for people to air their grievances about women.
Okay. I admit I have never participated in the manosphere, right? And I have never really even encountered, definitely never heard of a man self-proclaiming that I'm part of the manosphere. I've only ever heard that term used by women specifically in the context of, oh, he's part of the manosphere, right? Or whatever, right? So I guess my assumption was that maybe there was a bias there, but I could be wrong, so I'll acknowledge that.
There's a picture on the screen that's blank, but it's a picture from the movie where it shows a red pill and a blue pill. So what that is from the Matrix is Morpheus gives Neo an option between two pills. The blue pill is just take this pill and the world will just be the way that you know it. But if you take the red pill, you'll see the world from a different perspective.
Right.
And so that's what being red pilled is seeing a world from a different perspective. But for the incel community, it's seeing the world of like how the world is against men and it's the women's fault because the world is set up for women and men are the ones who are don't have any privilege at all.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's just like it's supposed to be an alternate way of thinking. But the ironic thing that's really hilarious is that the taking of the pill is supposed to be an allegory for the transgender experience. And the two people who created the Matrix are trans women who are sisters.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I think the red pill thing is really interesting because I think that like conceptually, irregardless of the incel stuff, right? Like, I think that there is validity in the process of like, oh, I'm taking the red pill to like understand how the world works. Because in reality, that is what someone is doing when they realize that like, oh, the things that I've been taught over my life about how I have to be a certain type of way to succeed, and then you are not succeeding, you are understanding that the world works differently than the way you've been taught up until that point. Like, it's not a false analogy at all. But the falsity is that, like, you know, it's all intentional. Like, it's all the women, like, gearing, like, pulling the strings and, like, trying to design or build a reality that, like, is intentionally, you know, harming you and your output in life, right? Your lot in life. And that, like, you know, the echo chamber part of that is, in my, you know, eyes at least, is like, is hyper focused on that part of the analogy rather than like the critical thinking that comes to mind of like, oh, I was taught for like, let's say 30 years of my life that I should behave a certain type of way. And well, they may be wrong. Like, the teachings that I got as a kid may have been flawed, and maybe I need to act differently, right? Maybe I need to change rather than be raging at an external, you know, party, aka women, that somehow are the cause of all of this. You know, I think it's the devil's in the details a little bit there, because in my head, the red pill is an apt analogy for part of that experience,
Right.
but not all of it.
Right. Well, that goes into our next slide, which is how is it found? Like, how is the incel community found? So usually boys and men are recruited from general message boards on the internet, YouTube recommended content, gaming chat rooms, and forums most commonly and often used by teenage boys. And so they're like Disney, where they try to get you while you're young. So like Disney, I'm sure will hate me for comparing them to that. But they do that too. Like, it's the same tactic. They get them while they're young because you're the most malleable when you're young, and they're already like learning these social scripts. They're already learning these like social expectations from people who are like, it's not going to get better than this. You might as well start being angry now, you know? And so I also went into a list about like what makes someone more susceptible to being red pilled. I'd also like to note that it's not only one of things, but it's usually like a combination of these. And a few of them are social isolation. So if they don't have any close friends or very few close friends, they don't have a sense of community, or they have very limited emotional outlets, which we looked at in the last subject. We talked about this is probably one of the most common. Number 2 is an identity threat. So it's like feeling threatened that they're like failing at masculinity. Like, say they're like a teenager and they have a best friend who gets a girlfriend, and they're like, what? Or everyone has a girlfriend and they're like, I don't have a girlfriend. It's like that comparison, or feeling like they're falling behind their peers. And then it's also that mindset of like, oh, why do you know other girls like me? They're like kind of like feeling sorry for yourself. It turns into like, it's not that there's something wrong with me. It's there's something wrong with them for not wanting to be with me. And then another thing is a poor economy. I think the economy and where we are now is why a lot more men are growing a lot more conservative. And so with the poor economy, there's low wages, a high cost of living. So you don't make enough money to survive. but then you're still the social expectation to provide. And then because they don't reach these like milestone, again, it becomes that identity threat of like, something's wrong with me because like, oh, these other guys, which they call men who like have what they want, like the guys who are like 6 feet tall, have money, or like
Chad.
or yeah, Chads, which I thought was hilarious. It's like no girl I know wants to date a guy named Chad.
Yeah, it's kind of like the classic douchebag name. No
Yeah.
offense to any Chads listening.
Right. It's a lot of resentment, and it's like they need it to land somewhere. They like need to place it somewhere. And what other place can they do it than the thing that they want the most, which is like attention and affection from women. Which is really a weird conclusion to get to.
Yeah. It does seem misguided.
Yeah.
It's hard to argue with that.
Other traits that make them susceptible is rigid views on masculinity, which again, not their fault. They're socially taught. And then heavy internet use, because anyone can say anything they want on the internet. It's like so unregulated. And then a lack of education on relationships. And not even just relationships with the opposite gender, but like relationships with each other. The reason why I introduced you as like the most non-toxic man is because like you're the only guy I've ever really met in my life. Immediately right off the bat, I could tell you had like good relationships with other men. Like you would hug other men, like you're like an affectionate guy, like, and you like talk positively with your bros, you know? You literally have a call once a week with your best friends where you just talk about life, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm extremely thankful for that. I think it's one of the things that has shaped me. Not the only thing, but it's one of the things that I think I've been exceedingly lucky. There's no limit to how much I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's so meaningful to me.
And it's not like you come from like a major city. You're like from a California small town, which is not, it's not like a Midwest small town, but you come from a more conservative area still. And it still blows my mind that like you and your group of friends like have, like you've grown up in that space, but don't have that mindset. So it like gives me hope for people out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the list that you've shared here about reasons that make someone susceptible to being red-pilled has a common trend. About every one of those bullet points is an external factor, right? Like social isolation, the economy, your internet use, like all of those things are things that anybody has the option, if they have the capability and the means to avoid, that they can do it. But not everybody does, right? And so a lot of these things that are kind of gateway drugs into this community or mentality are things that may be outside of your control. And so I can understand why, for the same reason that I feel lucky that I have the friends that I do and have developed the way that I have, it's the same reason why I feel it's unfortunate and not anybody's fault that they ended up getting drug into a community of people who make them think the same way that they've been brought up to think as a kid, that like, you know, of other people, other external factors in your life are teaching you to think a certain way. It's the same thing that's happening here, in my eyes at least, right? Like there's sort of a conditioning that comes from being exposed to these echo chamber communities that are online, that are, like you said, it's places where people can put words out that are hiding behind an anonymous name or something, and that can be read or perceived as fact. And it's very easy to like, it's why like conspiracy theories, you know, have legs and move, right? The same thing is happening in my eyes with this. It's very tough to know that like the reason why somebody is in that or is thinking in that is not necessarily at any fault of their own, but it's just that they've potentially never been given an opportunity to think critically and been given a chance to think differently about why they think that way. And once you're into one of these communities, I mean, it's like with any friends, right? Like you are the sum of the 5 people who are the closest to you and how you act, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if your 5 closest online friends are people who think a type of way, well, you're most likely going to end up thinking that same type of way, you know? And if men are conditioned to don't show emotion, don't express yourself, well, in real life, you're unlikely to find someone who's not been taught those principles. And so where do you turn? The internet, right? And so you end up on these communities. Like, again, I don't think it's any fault of anybody who
Yeah.
ends up thinking this type of way.
I'm not trying to not hold these men accountable, because I do think that there's a desire to stay in it. When I was like doing research, there was a guy that was like, I made this account as a joke and I was gonna like give it to my dad, but then I ended up like really enjoying the community here. But then I just got a girlfriend and I don't want her to think that I'm anything like this community. So it was like, nice being here, but like I'm gonna leave. And then just like the follow-up comments are all these men are like, she's just gonna leave you. It's like once they're initiated in this, when they get red pilled, then it's like just other people tearing you down.
Right.
That's what I think is so sad about it. Is like I can't imagine going into a space and then just being like torn down constantly and like being told that I should kill myself. It's so terrifying what the men are willing to say to each other on this chat room, and then like them not being concerned for their own like safety or well-being to like pull themselves out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a form of self-harm. It's like a negative self-view of yourself that you just are keep coming back to it, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the distinction, right? I don't think there's any blame to be held in being placed in a situation where you feel powerless enough that you reach out to whatever community you can find that may appear to give you a sense of belonging or whatever. I genuinely do not think that there's a problem with that. I think that it sucks because if somebody takes that step, they're kind of trapped in this, right? It's very hard to consider being in that sort of a community and the constant barrage of terminology and rage and hatred and self-loathing, and like it's very hard to kind of twist your mind to shift out of that, right?
Right.
And yes, there are probably, for example here, right? Like let's say that I'm some guy and I just kind of dip my toes into this community for the very first time, and then maybe I'm not like swayed by everything, right? But then I have one negative interaction with a woman. Maybe I go on a bad date or just something doesn't really go the way that it could have. And that's just dumb luck, right? Maybe it just was a fluke or whatever. Well, my immediate reaction is like, oh, all those people on the internet was right, you know? All those people that have kind of taught me or like maybe there's some wisdom there, and then they'll lean in, right?
Yeah. They say a lot of the people that are in it are lurkers. Like that just like kind of go on the site and just keep like looking and looking. And they don't necessarily engage, but they just like it's a sense of community for them.
Right.
To feel like they're not alone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really sad, and there's a term in software stuff about enshittification, which is basically you have some software or tool or technology that was built to provide value, right? Like genuinely there was an intention of something really good and positive. And online communities are a great example of that. When the first communities came out, like when you think about the ability to like talk with your friends on MySpace or whatever, like that's so cool. Like there's genuinely so much positive net benefit that could come from that. But the principle of enshittification is that like as enough stuff happens to a system, it will gradually degrade and cause potentially more harm than good based on a bunch of different reasons. But that happens with online communities all the time, right? Like this thing that was supposed to provide something really valuable and positive now has a possibility and a potential for people to come on and find really negative, self-harming spaces, and you get sucked in and you're very, very, I mean, this is how there's such a big problem with people who are mass shooters, right? And things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And there has been like evidence that a lot of them tend to be people who are in those traumatic situations where they're in social isolation, where they have very limited social connections or external factors such as like, poor living or whatever, right? Like all the same bullet points, right? Tend to kind of drive these really negative behaviors. And again, it's not like anybody did anything wrong to get to that point, but the possibilities of where you can go from there are really negative. The list that you've got here, I mean, probably I would say that it's not like you have to be hitting all the bullet points to get red pilled, right?
Yeah.
It's some arbitrary combination of multiple of those factors that could get you there.
Yeah.
Just like any other sort of like, mental health concern, right? Like even if we weren't talking about incel community, right? Like I think a lot of those 6-7 bullet points would also lead to anxiety, depression. Like, like if you are socially isolated only by itself, right? There's a lot of problems that can arise from that.
Yeah.
Very tricky.
And that's why it's easy for these people to feel indoctrinated, because they find that sense of belonging from this community they've now joined, and it gives them an explanation of like, oh, here's why this is even happening to you. And then it validates their experience, and then eventually gives them direction on what to do next, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. All right, let's go into the next slide, which is what do they believe? So, I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but incels have this obsession with sex and an anger with being denied it. They're obsessed with rating people by appearance and their 80-20 theory. And the 80-20 theory is that they believe 20% of the most attractive men enjoy 80% of the sex with our society. So it's like only these specific men are the ones sleeping with all the women.
Mm-hmm.
And we already said, but these men are called Chads, the 20%. And the women who are deemed like the attractive women, which I think is hilarious, but they're called Stacy's. Which is...
Look at these two very white names.
Right. There's a belief that incels are primarily white privileged men, and that's not true. If there's men from all different types of communities that join and lurk in it. There's also like racial infighting as well. Like some of the like more white supremacy leaning incels obviously make a lot of like racist comments towards each other. So there's like also a lot of infighting. They use derogatory terms like foid, which is the word female and humanoid together, and toilet to describe women. Like this is how they describe women, which is
pretty depressing.
Objectification.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they believe that women only care about looks, and that a man who is ugly, short, bald, non-white, pimply, or in any way imperfect is just cursed for a lifetime of unfair sexual frustration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's really depressing to see. I've never heard the term foid before. That's a new one for me.
Yeah, I thought it was a silly.
Yeah.
Because I was like, what does that stand for?
Right. It sucks because like, I mean, in that context, right? Like from the outside looking in, this looks like a very negative, confused, isolated population, right? Of people who like, because a lot of these concepts, right? The 80-20 thing, the Foyd toilet terminology, like I don't really think those are common unless you're in the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not familiar with any of that, and I think it's like, it sucks because there definitely seems to be that insular nature of this, of like, well, once you get part of it, it's kind of hard to like not think of it or not be part of it. Like it's the same thing about like being drug in or trapped. And then that shapes how you interact with future interactions, right? Because now you have a little bit of exposure to this. If you do have those bad interactions later, it's only going to further, spiral you down a certain type of way. Fascinating and terrifying and very disappointing,
Yeah.
you know, in many ways, because it's obviously a repeating pattern, right? Like, you wouldn't have a community of people who feel the need to express these ideas and concepts if there wasn't a big enough trend of people responding to those external circumstances with hate and frustration. That's the sad thing, is that there aren't enough resources or education to kind of prevent people from getting in this situation in the first place. Because I can really see how easy it would be to be, once you're in, you're stuck, and your entire view is based around that.
Yeah.
And it's also scary for women, right? Like, I cannot imagine, I know this whole episode is like men and like how, you know, like, let's flip the script and like see how it feels to be a man in the dating world, right? But like, it's fucking scary for a woman to know that like you could go on a date with a guy and he could be one of these people.
Well,
you
yeah,
know?
that's why they say like a man's biggest fear on a first date is a woman not looking like her picture, and a woman's biggest fear on a first date is getting killed.
Right. Yeah. It's a complete shift.
I just, there's nothing more I can say than it's so shitty that men get warped into this. It's so shitty for them to feel so attached to this negative space.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, all the world tells them like you have to view things in this very
Right.
aggressive and harsh light, you know?
Yeah.
So for the next slide, how is it hurting them? So we've talked about it already, that this is already a very hurtful thing for men. But one of the things that makes it worse is like there's definitely people that are literally monetizing this. Like the creators who are like incel content creators, or like, you know, conservative content creators who will continue to like spout these beliefs. It's a way of like farming these people. Like they're making money off these people's disillusionment.
Mm-hmm.
And the worst part is like they're trying to sell you like, oh, if you just buy my membership and you can learn how to be a man and like do all these things, and like then all these women will talk to you because you're a man now and you've taken my course. It's like, this is a scam. Like at the end of the day, they are selling you something, but the only way that they are going to profit is if they still keep you down. Like, it's just, there's little incentive to help you if it means that you'll just keep coming back. So they're just, it's a lot of these creators are just like manipulating you. They take your pain, they see you, and then they give you someone to blame.
Mm-hmm.
And then the internet, like platforms, because you're so wrapped in like this belief system now, you're continuing to watch the content, and then the online platforms continue to feed you the more and more content that's similar to it, which then increases the views and the money that the people get for making this content.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like an endless cycle of you continuing to hurt yourselves and then all these people making money off of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a very slippery slope, because, you know, because of how you think about someone who is in a bad space, right? If you are socially isolated or vulnerable or feeling like you don't have a community, and then you give them that, you give them an opportunity to have people to talk with or whatever, they get that momentum of like, oh, like I found my people, right? It's so easy to then see someone who's advertising a service on that platform or group to be like, well, this is, I see you, I understand why this is a problem. Here's what let me sell you my snake oil, right? Let me show you the ways that I know how to navigate that. But the people who are there, right, they may not be any more apt to give you advice than someone else from that community, but they are using it as a space to make some money, right? It's easy to lose track of the sight that some people will take advantage of your communication or your vulnerability and try to, where you're just a number there, you're just an income source, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another reason why this podcast is like, it's really important to me that this is like an accessible thing, because I don't want people to fall in some sort of trap where like they didn't have the information where they could have, versus like these people they're not giving you this information for free. They're like, buy my course, or like it's
advertisement,
Yeah.
I mean, I genuinely, like, I think we've talked about this once before on the podcast, but I remember we were on a flight somewhere and like the guy sitting next to me was like super deep into some videos. I know you told me the name of the guy, but I don't remember the name of the creator. Andrew Tate, yeah. And I remember watching those videos. Of course, I'm doing the thing that you always do on a plane ride, which is like creeping on the person next to you, or watching whatever they're doing, because you're bored out of your mind. And I just remember being so like unnerved and sad and just like icked. Like, I know people say like, oh, the ick thing is like a thing that you like. Some people take ownership or like problem with the term ick, right? But I got the ick watching this guy like look at these videos, because it just felt so hollow and hopeless, right? Of just like, I'm not saying this was the thing, but like this guy, like, that was who he was. It was in the middle of the plane, right? We're in the middle of the sky. He had downloaded these videos to save to watch later as like his in-flight entertainment was. And I just like, I could not fathom it, because it means that like, it was, I think it's the first time in my life that I've ever like actually seen that a little bit. And it was really sad and really like scary, because like I know this thing happens, right? Like these people are out there.
A good way to look at this is the manosphere is like a poison, but it's like being masked as guidance.
Yeah, I can see that. I do appreciate the clarification on the manosphere too, because like I admit I've like never Googled that or like even looked it up, but I genuinely thought that it was like, I don't know,
spaces where men can exist.
Yeah, like and look at that. Like, I mean, if somebody had told me like, hey man, you should check out the manosphere, right? Like, you need some like male friends. I was like, yeah, like I'm lonely, I'll go join the manosphere, and then you like sunk in the pit, right?
Right.
So I can see it, totally get it.
What it all boils down to is like, these are just men who are looking for connection and just finding it in the wrong place. Oh no, that's the bell. Looks like we're out of time, but we're not done yet. In 2 weeks, join us for part 2. Have any questions about human sexuality? Submit them to our anonymous form linked in the show notes. Your homework? Share this episode with a friend, because the best way to destigmatize sex is to talk about it. And if you're ready for extra credit, grab our free Essential Sex Conversations workbook by signing up for our newsletter. That's it for today's lesson. Class dismissed.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.